So I am just going to do a very brief introduction here just because I've been communicating with many of you all about meat production over the past couple of years. And I am by no means an expert. And since we have two persons who are here who are experts in small grain production, I'm going to let them speak. I just want to give a little bit of introduction, particularly because some of the questions I fielded on the phone in the last year or two represent some change that's going on right now, and I just want to introduce those ideas. Oh, let's see if I can figure out how to hear this again. That one there. We're broadcasting this live right now, and so you have to bear with me. My technological prowess ends at the abacus, so here how this goes. And the main thing I want to introduce you to are some handouts that we're distributing that are out there in the red folders. And as I was putting together the packets and some of the handouts, I realized that all of our handouts are not labeled. We have the organic wheat variety trials. We have the state wheat variety performance recommendation. It just says wheat. And it doesn't say, is this soft wheat, is this hard wheat? Why is that? And that's because in North Carolina has been growing soft wheat here for a couple of hundred years. The whole industry has always been around soft wheat. But that's one of the reasons I want to do a little introduction today is because we have some interest in some other classes of wheat. We have a few hundred acres of hard wheat out there being grown this last year organically. So I just wanted to give you the background on why it is we grow soft wheat, what's going on with these new classes of wheat. So what do we grow here in North Carolina typically? I mean, I know growing up I actually didn't know. I just knew we had wheat. Well, we grow soft red winter wheat. Where is this being, what are the mills that are purchasing this in the state? What are they doing with this product? Primarily it's going into cakes, pastries, flatbreads, crackers, but it has other uses as well. You can't actually, if you've ever actually tried to ask the mills, where's this wheat going to, you probably get the same response I do, which is they're not going to tell you that. It can go into lots of all-purpose flours as well. Certainly many brands, some brands of all-purpose flour are almost entirely soft wheat. Some are a blend of soft and hard wheats. What is the hallmark of soft red winter wheat? They tend to be low to medium protein. We call them soft wheat because they have a soft endosperm. That's just something, I mean, you can actually, if I had some samples here we're passing around, you can actually smash them between your fingernails and you can sort of informally assess how hard the wheat is. That just happens to be associated with other characteristics as well, but it's something that we can put our finger on. So if you look at the handouts in your packet there, you will have, not to suck up while Dr. Calgar is here, but in terms of variety summation, this is one of the nicer out of all the commodities. It really does a nice job of summarizing the results of the official variety trials that go in every year and making real world and in real time. These are published at the perfect time for you to be able to make your decisions when you're buying your fall wheat seed. All of these are soft wheats. I don't believe there's ever, this is a soft wheat test. Again, this is what our industry is. It's a soft wheat industry. And you'll see there, she will talk about the disease and the mycotoxins. But I want to introduce then the hard wheats, which is, like I said, this is what I've fielded a number of phone calls about, like what is this new deal with the hard red winters? First of all, why have we not grown those? Because as a few growers have gotten into this have discovered, there is a price premium for hard red winter wheats. And now we've got an organic market. You can get your premium for organic, and you're going to get your premium for hard red winter as well. What's the premium all about? These are medium to higher proteins. So that's what we're going to use in the primary flour that's going into a lot of our breads. And that's why we get the premium out of those. There's also some other classes. And the other thing that has brought this up is that we have an excellent wheat breeding program courtesy of USDA ARS who has been working on getting hard red winters adapted to our conditions. And so we have some varieties now like New East. There's also a variety. Dr. David Marshall has been doing this breeding program. New East is something that's been bred under North Carolina conditions, released here, and has done very well over a number of years on yield trials. So we know that the yield and the quality of it is very solid. It's only been released a year, 2 years now. So the seed availability has been an issue, but it's becoming more available now. TAM 303 is something that he bred while he was at Texas A&M. And so it was something that was bred under Texas conditions that were somewhat similar to our conditions, but not a perfect fit. And so TAM 303 has done very well in a number of years here on both yield and quality. It did get shredded, was it this last year or the year before? We had some conditions that I think were really non-ideal for TAM 303, and we had a couple of growers really do very poorly on the yield on that. But that was an unusual year. Previous to that, it had done very well, but Dr. Marshall has asked me to repeat, to say repeatedly, the new yeast is an improvement upon that, and that it has other lines too that are going to be coming out. This is a long-term commitment on his part. He's going to continue this breeding effort, and we'll have continuous supply of improved hard wheat lines. So we have potential here for tapping into a new market. He has also released a hard white winter wheat. And this particular has not any history in here in the state. White wheats are associated with a problem of sprouting in the head. They are much more sensitive to sprouting in the head. And we'll talk about what that causes here in a little bit. But it's thought that the red wheats, which we have hard red and soft red, the red actually prevents sprouting in the head a little bit. That's part of that red characteristic is to prevent that. But he's been working on that. So he has this white wheat that is really quite resistant to sprouting in the head. And that means that we're going to be able to make a nice bread out of it. Because once we sprout in the head to a very small degree, I mean, if we have heavy sprouting in 10 to 20% of the crop, you can ruin the entire harvested crop from making bread out of. That level of enzyme development that goes along with sprouting in the head is going to ruin your baking characteristics. So we do not want sprouting in the head. And then I have gotten this question several times, and I'm glad to answer more questions after it, but I don't want to crouch on our speakers. But there are other classes of wheat, and my answer on the phone has been, don't think about it, because really, don't think about it. You have a lot. There are many reasons not to think about them. There are hard red springs, there are Durham springs, there are soft whites, a lot of things that we just don't have any genetic material that we can do anything with here right now. Any questions about that so far? I don't, but we are, oh, I'm sorry, question. Do we have paper with this slide on there? And I don't, but this whole thing is being recorded and will appear on our website. You can download the presentation if you're interested in having the presentations. So flowers, I mean, a lot of, so if we look at the conventional mills here in the state, I couldn't tell you what percentage of that is, most of it is going to further processors. We don't have a lot that's going straight into flour. We have some small mills doing flour. Now, on the organic end, it's the exact opposite. We've got Lindley Mills, who's producing flour for most of the whole food bulk flour that's coming out of Lindley Mills. We've got Bay State Milling, which a lot of their flour is going to artisanal bakers, eastern half of the country here. So we got a lot of flour coming out of our organic mills, which is very different than how our conventional mills are primarily set up in the state. But to give you a perspective on what the flours that are coming out of this, the flour grades all-purpose has almost no meaning, okay? If you look at the different makers of all-purpose flour, there's a pretty wide variation in what they're calling all-purpose. I know when I lived, my mother likes to say, when I lived up in Yankee Land. When I lived up in Yankee Land, she would bring white wheat flour with her because you can't get the right flour in Yankee Land. And what does she mean by that? I actually looked that up because I had no idea what she's talking about. She only make a biscuit out of white wheat flour. Well, white really all-purpose flour is 8% protein. It's 100% soft wheat, and that makes a very light, fluffy biscuit. And so that's why she preferenced that. Most of the rest of the country, all-purpose wheat, generally, all-purpose flour is generally around 10.5% protein. Not always, though. King Arthur, when I was up in New England, King Arthur was what was supplying almost all the artisanal bakeries up there. Their all-purpose flour is 11.7% protein. It's 100% hard wheat. No blending at all. So again, all-purpose, people like to say, what is that? But most of it that's being moved around the country is going to be a blend of hard and soft wheat. And they're going to be trying to get around 10.5% protein on that. Bread wheats, then, we're looking at, again, that variation is going to change. Look at this bread wheat here. White Lily's bread wheat is actually identical in protein content to the all-purpose coming out of King Arthur. They're blending soft wheat into that occasionally by all appearances, but certainly they're going to have a lot of hard wheat to hit that kind of number. If not all hard wheat at times, they're not going to tell you. King Arthur deals with Arsenal, they like to advertise what's in theirs, so they're actually telling you, no, we're all hard wheat. And then this red wheat, which is that's probably the highest red flour protein content in the industry, 12.7, and that's actually a spring wheat, which we can't even produce at all. So, all right, that's probably more than you wanted to know. So let me just give you interpretation then. You've got in there also the organic wheat variety trials that came out of this year. This is 1 year's data, and so I would strongly encourage you to not look at that sheet without simultaneously looking at the stuff that comes out of Randy Weiss and Christina Calger's program on variety recommendations. There's more data embedded in these recommendations than there is in the organic trials. Furthermore, this is where you go to for your disease information, because they do the disease information on the same varieties that are in our trial. We don't have any disease ratings. That's all handled. So you really need both of those sheets to make any intelligent interpretations. And so you can look here at the 3 sites that we tested organic wheat at. And we're doing this test because you, the growers, asked about whether organic conditions were selecting for different wheat varieties, and whether different varieties are going to do well under organic conditions than do well under conventional conditions. That's the whole purpose of replicating the official variety trials out of NC State. Wheat has been interesting. We actually see some variation in ranking. I mean, there's some real surprises here, and the sheet spells out a little better. There's some weird ones. We threw in a couple of triticales into the test. If anybody's growing directly for a feed grade market, just kind of for fun too, to see where they rank. And they did very well in yield, much better than they do in the official variety trials at NC State. So we did see some places where the organic test did appear to be somewhat different from the variety trialing coming out of conventional conditions. And so that's the way I would use this sheet, is interpreting where do we see some differences in the organic versus the conventional. The other thing we have on there, slide on there, we have quality information that came out of the variety trial that is not available in the conventional test for all the trials. Dr. Marshall's lab ran all of this for us. We've got the protein contents on there, and we've got the falling numbers. Now, I mentioned before the sprouting in the head. What the heck is the falling number about? That is an indirect measure of measuring sprouting in the head. It is something bakers look at, it's something the mills look at, it's something you may have been rejected from a mill for. I don't know what Lindley's rejecting on right now, maybe 300. But if we get below 300, some mills start to get concerned on the falling number. If we get below 250, probably all of them are going to reject you at that point. So our goal was to stay above 300 on the falling number for wheat. Now, what's the biggest determinant for that falling number? I've talked about there's varietal information in here because there's varietal variation on falling numbers. Sprouting resistance. I mentioned the white wheats are more susceptible to having a bad falling number than the reds. But the biggest determinant has nothing to do with variety. The biggest determinant is the wheat is ready to be harvested. You get rain several days in a row or several cycles in a row of wetting and drying and wetting and drying. That's what creates the sprouting in the head. Varieties can help you resist that, but it's an innate problem if you have tough harvesting conditions. In fact, if you look at our data, all the varieties are up over 300, except for the 2 triticales where it doesn't really apply. And so all the varieties did very well. Well, why is that? What was our spring line? It was a nice harvest in June. We got around all my sites, even though they're all over hell and half of Georgia. I got to all of our sites in a timely way. We got our wheat harvested, no problems. Really, the only time we see variety playing a big role in this is, maybe 1 year out of 5 we have that wetness problem, and then you might having one variety over another might help you some. But it won't. There's no perfect solution to having rain, wetting, and drying cycles on your wheat. It's not good.
Since North Carolina has such a long history in soft wheat growing, I'm still a little stumped as to why I mean, just for the length of the history, why you don't see more grain dryers for those years that it's wet, because it seems that the tradition is to let the grain dry in the field because we don't have the rain pressure anyways, but once every 5 years. So am I just missing that, or is there more of a tradition?
It's a good, that's a great question for the web audience. The question was, why don't we see more grain drying going on in wheat? So you're basically picking it while it's damp, as long as we can drive the field and run it through the grain dryers. I'd say two parts. We'll only have one part of the state that has lots of grain drying potential, and that's out on the coastlands and the blacklands where we have lots of grain drying. They have that there for their corn because they pick their corn wet and they dry quite a bit of that crop. I would say one factor on the conventional end is wheat has been marginally profitable through much of its history here in the state. The last couple of years being a special exception where they're making lots of great money on it. And so I think there was an idea of spending extra money on a wheat crop just wasn't on anybody's mind. That would be one thing. The other thing is that if it's real wet, and the blacklands are a perfect example of that, even if you could pick wet grain and dry it, you can't actually drive a combine through the field. I mean, those fields will get messed up if we try to drive on them if we've got too much dampness out there. So you can still get locked out of a field even with the grain dryer. The other thing I mentioned the proteins here, is that we're going to hear more about protein and fertility management, but the soft wheats can occasionally get pretty nice proteins. I mean, the target protein value for somebody that's going to the bread wheat market is 12%. So we've got some soft wheats that are hitting 12 and 13% right here. So could you make bread out of them? Yeah, you could make bread out of that. And we're not going to get into the bread making characteristics of. The other part of it is, what is your bread market? An artisanal baker is a different beast than somebody breaking, on an industrial scale in loaf pans. They generally want their protein volume number specs and have much less flexibility than an artisanal baker might have. But still, even for an industrial baker, if you could give them here's a soft wheat shooting 13% protein, but it's very unreliable. This is an exception that we usually hit that kind of protein level with our soft wheats. All right, I will stop there then. I think that's all out.